I praise God for your faithfulness and for setting aside time. And I know you're all working and busy with a lot of things on a regular week, but you have committed yourself to being here. I really hope, if not myself, but God is doing justice to your time that you're allotting to Him. And hopefully, it'll only make you and your spouse and your children and your church and your spiritual walk with the Lord that much more stronger. That is my sincere prayer. Okay. Okay, let's dive right in, and I'm gonna just quickly share my slides here. Okay, so what we want to do here is, yesterday, as usual, I ran out of time, so I just wanted to recap a little bit, or the tie the loose end, so to speak, with a couple slides, and it may take a few minutes, but and that will take us right into what we want to talk today. So bear with me, but let's go with what I have for today. The one concept that I did not get to share yesterday when I was talking about men and women, husband and wife, and married life is fight fair. You may be thinking, why is this pastor encouraging fights? I'll tell you my experience. I have told many couples in my ministry, in my church, and also in a private capacity. I said, hey, don't fight, don't fight. When I talk about fight, I'm not talking about you punching somebody and bleeding and things like that. I'm talking about quarrels, disagreements. That the easy way to capture it is fight. So when I tell them don't fight in your marriages, I can tell you very fairly and openly that 100% of the people that I had told them not to fight, they actually went on to fight. So either I was not efficient enough, or that's a human condition this side of heaven, that we always will have a temptation to engage in a disagreement with our spouses. So I changed. I said, rather than saying don't fight, which is not going to work, I'm going to ask you to fight, but then you got to fight fair. So that's the word. So if you can remember that for yesterday and today, fight fair. If you're in a relationship, can be a husband, wife, can be a son and mother, or son and father, or it could be any relationship, but focusing especially on a family unit, especially between husband and wife, when you have to descend into a disagreement, in a quarrel that I'm labeling here as a fight, please remember to fight fairly. What do I mean by that? Here we go. No bad words you will regret later. Be careful, be in control of your emotions. Do not spew out words, because words, when they escape your lips, once it goes, it will do the damage. And it'll also hurt you, because you are using that against a person that you love the most in this world. So be careful not to use bad words. Whatever the bad words may mean to you in your context within your husband or wife, do not use them. Secondly, do not let your emotional, let me shrink this a little bit. Do not let your emotional anger rule over your reason. Even in your anger, do not sin. Okay, that's biblical mandate for us. What I'm saying here is, even in your emotional anger, when you have anger, always give room for your brain to reason out. Because when you reason things, you wouldn't want to say and do certain things. Emotion can overrule certain things. So hopefully, even when you are in a fight, always tell yourself, let me think through this. That's very important. Number 3, no threats or ultimatum during heated exchange. Now, some of these points that I've captured is through personal experience, talking with people, going through life. And so this may look something mundane. Sometimes it can look so common, but they are very important, because this is what happens. Oftentimes when people are fighting with husband and wife, there's almost always some threats and ultimatum, not allowed. Especially in a Christian family, especially in a Seventh-day Adventist family, no threats and ultimatum. Example of that is this: if you do this, I will leave you. If you do this, do not have an ultimatum or threats. When you're talking and you're quarreling and you're in a disagreement, keep it at that level. Because the thing is this: any harsh words, even an ultimatum, threats that you say just for the sake of saying and not following through, your ears are also listening. It will make an impact in a negative way. So don't want to put down threats and ultimatum talk about the subject matter at hand as far as possible in a fair manner. Before, try to rein in your tone. This is very difficult for me, and I think some of our cultures are very that way too. And if I could be wrong, maybe all of you are very mellowed, very sweet, very soft. Maybe I'm the only one that's a loud mouth over here. But if you have to speak, sometimes even if you mean well, your tone can betray you. So if you can, but sometimes it's very difficult. If you've lived with that tone for all your life, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 years, you're not going to be able to quickly change it. But at least try to rein in your tone during disagreement, because you're not that angry, but then your voice can mean something else for the other spouse who's hearing or listening to what you have to say. Let the other person, very important, let the other person get to verbalize their 2 cents worth, even if you do not agree. The central tenet and the core of fighting fair is this. If you can do this, hats off to you. Even when you think you are right, even when you think you have a point to prove, know that who you're talking to, it's your husband you're talking to. Know that who you're talking to, it's your wife you're talking to. Even that means if it's your children that you're talking to. But focusing on husband and wife, stop, give time to the other person to also verbalize their 2 cents worth. Even if you do not agree or see the light of day in their argument, let them also talk. It is even more important in a relationship where one person is dominant. Unfortunately, it is true more than wrong. One partner is almost always dominant. It could be emotionally dominant, gesture-wise dominant. It can be overpowering demeanor or tone. You as a husband or wife need to know what you're capable of, and then what your husband or wife is not capable of, and be always cognizant of their position, and stop and encourage that person even in your disagreement, in the middle of your fight. Let the other person voice their tone also. It's very important. When you're able to do this, I think you're very close of not fighting anymore. Okay, let's move on to the next one. Try substituting your spouse for Jesus. Powerful if you can do this during a disagreement, and learn to express your feeling with dignity. When you're talking to each other, sometimes when you see the person who is or she, you may not appreciate, and your tone and everything else may be rough. But know always, everyone that is created is in the image of God. We talked about that we are created in the image of God, and there's some aspect of godliness in us. He has created us in what, and so it is very important. If you can actually substitute that spouse of yours for Jesus. If Jesus is in front of you, you're terribly mad and upset and really upset, but it is Jesus in front of you. How would you verbalize your disagreement? How would you quarrel with Jesus? Some of us do quarrel, we cry to Jesus, we fight with Jesus, but you do it in a very, very interesting way. Do it that way if you can, and present your feelings with dignity. The last one on this slide here, spouses, whoever that may be, cooperate with each other even in quarrels as the other spouse is trying to fight fair. Now, the other person may not buy in completely into this fight fair, and in the middle of it, they may even use words against you and make fun of you. What do you mean fight fair and things like that? This is what I mean. Spouses, when one spouse is trying to engage in a disagreement and fighting or quarreling, and they're still trying to see if they can do it fairly, the other person, don't make fun of the effort. See what it is being done. You also cooperate so that the fight can be fair. Okay, we're moving on to the next slide. Remember your children. This will segue into what we're trying to talk about today. Remember your children. Now, I'm assuming you can still hear me and see the slides, correct? I forgot to ask you guys. Can somebody say yes?
Yes.
Very good. Thank you so much, Esther. Appreciate it. Remember your children. It says, remember your children. Okay. The fight fair also goes into your children. Very, very important people here. Finally, a good spousal fight. If you forget everything and anything in this, remember this. This is actually the core of everything we're going to talk about today. Not the fight, but how it affects the children. Okay, a good spousal fight is when you can let your children watch you fighting. If you cannot let your kids watch, then you're not ready to engage in disagreement. In fact, I'll go to a point to say you have no right to fight, quarrel, or disagree because you're not ready to actually do it in front of your wives and your husbands. What do I mean by that? The next point will illustrate this. This is important because children learn both good and bad from their parents, and you are the source, husband, wife, mom, and dad, for them to learn how to fight in their marriages too. Can you imagine? You do not only try to harm and destroy, some of us, God forbid we do that, but harm our marriages. In the process, we perpetuate the vicious cycle into a next generation. Now, you and I know this. Now, you don't have to answer me, but think for yourself. When your mom and dad were quarreling, disagreeing, and fighting, and when they actually sent you away to your room, or when they were choosing to fight when you were already asleep or you were not at home, do you really not know that they actually fought? Do you not really know how they quarrel? Do you not really know how loud and how unhappy and how painful those quarrels and disagreements and fights were? You know, but though your parents tried so hard so that you don't get involved into it, that you don't know what is happening between them, you still know. I know how my parents fought. And I can tell you, many times it was not good. They don't know I was watching, but I knew how. Take it for granted. Children know. And so it is so important when you are fighting, you should be able to bring your kids, sit them in the front room and say, Mom and Dad is going to quarrel. Mom and Dad is going to disagree today. Mom and Dad is going to actually fight with one another. I want you kids to watch. Can you do that? If you can do that, praise the Lord. Because in doing it with dignity, with honor, with a beautiful tone and a love in your heart, and you can still disagree and make your point to each other, you have just now taught your children how to fight in their marriages. And when they go ahead in their marriages, they're going to do exactly what you did. So it is so imperative, so important that you fight fair. And if you can only make your children watch your fights, God bless you there. Moving on. Epigenetics. Epigenetics, by the way, is the study of how your environment and behaviors can change how your genes work. Epigenetic changes are reversible and don't alter the DNA sequence. Instead, they modify the DNA by adding chemical compounds. Those chemical compounds are called methylation or demethylation. Okay, they're called the epigenetic markers or marks. These markers tell the cell when to turn genes on and off. Why am I going into this? Let's go look at the next slide. Epigenetic changes can affect your health in many ways. Remember, I'm a health ministries director, including your mood, reactions, and susceptibility to disease. Can you imagine? It, in fact, affects everything. What? Epigenetics. And what is epigenetics? It is is how your environment and behavior can change how your genes work. Epigenetic mechanisms have been linked to many illnesses, including cancer, cognitive dysfunction, and cardiovascular disease. In fact, the whole body, the whole human, the mind, body, spirit, everything, especially mind and spirit, mind and body can be affected by the epigenetic changes. Now, put it in a layman's term. Every one of us is a sum of our mom and dad. We inherit DNA and genes from them, and we are the way I look, the way I am, the length and the height and the color of my hair and facial hair and things like that. They're all as a product of my mom and dad's genes, and it is expressed in here. While I cannot do much to many of those genes, there is a certain types of genes that actually works with switching in and switching on and switching off when there is a methyl group attached to it, is a chemical bonds, and then demethylation. What it does is when it is there, then the cell signals to make certain protein so that the cell can express a certain trait. It could be a disease, could be a mood function, it could be a mental ability, it could be a muscle growth, or whatever it is. As just an example, all of us have the same amount of fiber, what do you call muscle fiber. The bulky big bodybuilder versus someone who's so thin and lean, skin and bone, has the same amount of muscle fiber. No more, no less. If there is 10, he also has 10. But the only thing is, he has let his environment and his choice to affect how big each strand of the fiber would be, and so he's bulky. Can you imagine? That's in a very simplistic way of trying to explain how environmental and choices that we make through food and what we see, what we think, and what we hear can also alter the gene expression and bring about a tangible expression in our body. So be careful. While you are the product of your mom and dad, you're not, in a good way is good. Not everything your mom and dad passed to you has to be expressed in you. You can change to be a different person. If you came from a broken family, I know there's psychologists who go on to say that the propensity for you to have a broken family is very high, but it doesn't have to be. You can so choose, and certain genes can turn off, and certain genes can turn on. The food that you eat can turn on and turn off. For example, diabetes. We don't have to have diabetes just because mom and dad has it. Yes, if mom and dad had it and you have a high propensity to get it, but you can modify these gene expression so it can be mild, or it can be subdued, or it can be managed without being expressed in an extreme way. Why am I going there? We'll get there. Final slide on epigenetics, I think that is. No, maybe not. Factors that affect epigenetics: diet, I talked about it, physical activity, access to resources, exposure to environmental factors like pollution, and significant trauma. Examples of epigenetic inheritance in humans. These are tangible expression in a human person is impact of stress as a possible transgenerational risk factor for depression. By the way, I need to quickly say in 15 seconds, stress is a root, just like love of money is a root of all evil. Now, take it for granted. Stress is a root of all diseases. Stress creates cortisol, the stress hormone, and that is an inflammatory response that actually inflames our whole body. And now scientists are finding cancer, diabetes, cardiovascular disease, all these things has its roots in inflammation reaction. And inflammation, cortisol, stress. Just simple stress, sitting at home and stressing out. Can you imagine that? So stress is a possible transgenerational risk factor for depression. Effect of diet on the risk of cardiovascular diseases and diabetes across generation. We talked enough of that even yesterday, a little bit about choose what you eat. Multi-generational effects of exposure to environmental toxins on cancer risk and anxiety disorders. Wow, sounds a little sickening, isn't it? But look at the highlights that I'm putting on. Do you see this? This is what we're talking about: family. We're talking about husband and wife. We're talking about children specifically right now. We're talking about how the epigenetic inheritance in humans and a possible transgenerational risk. Can you imagine? Whatever you generate in your body and do to your body, it does not stay with you. It is passed on to another generation, transgenerational. Look at the effect of diet. What does it do? It actually increases risk of those diseases across generations. So you're not only affecting your body when you do something that is not right, you're affecting your children. Do you love your children? You got to do something of what you do to yourself. That's why there's a verse in the Bible that says, love others as you love yourself. But I would like to put a spin on it. Oftentimes people don't love themselves enough. It's easy for some of us to love others, but we love ourselves less. So love yourself well and good enough, and that will be the standard of measure of how you will love. Because sometimes when you don't love yourself enough, then your bar is so low. That's how you treat the other people. So the Bible, when he says love others as you love yourself, you don't love yourself, and you end up not loving others too. So love yourself in the Lord in an appropriate way, and then you can put that over to the next generations also. And look at the last one: multi-generational effects of exposure. Whatever you do to yourself, it increases the risk multi-generationally. Okay. We're talking about family, we're talking about discipleships. Discipleship begins at home. It's a cliche. We all know this. Multiple times you heard it from the pulpit. I don't have to remind you this. But let me say this. Even as pastors, I tell my intern pastors, I said, yeah, you're busy about work of the Lord, but be careful. Even more important than the work of the Lord is yourself and your family. Because if you cease to exist and if your family is not there, then you have no ministry to do. That's not only for pastors, that's for any ministry leaders. Take care of the families. I know sometimes people may use, okay, now that pastor said I need to take care of my family, I'm going to concentrate on my family and I'm not going to be involved in ministry. Don't go to extremes. You know what you're doing. We don't have to deceive anybody. It's us we deceive. There's always a balance in all things. The Bible says, what is good about you saving the entire world and losing your own soul? Discipleship. Win your wife, win your husband, win over your children. Create your home as a little heaven on this sinful earth. It's possible. We talked about it yesterday. Discipleships begin at home. And when everybody is doing that at home, then the church thrives, ministry thrives, God's kingdom is established even in a more robust way. You know, in America, we come across this, oh, how did the government do this? How did they take away the prayer from the schools? How did they take away the commandments from whatever? And I said, man, you're talking about it? When was the last time you prayed at home as a family? When was the last time you actually obeyed your 10 commandments? When was the last time? As a family unit, it's falling apart. And that's how the community, so the government of the day and the community is a reflection of a family unit back in our own families. There's some of it. I'm moving on. It's enough said on that one. You cannot teach what you don't practice. Talking about discipleship, talking about children specifically. You cannot teach what you don't practice. If you think you can yell out instructions to your children, just like the next slide, it says, if you insist in do what I sayism and not do what I do, you are setting your children up for a terribly difficult life ahead, if not a totally failed life. You know why? You know this, I know this. Whatever they may say, as parents may say, no matter how much we want to yell to the kids, they will hear, but the one that makes impact is what they actually see you do. The next one there, while kids listen to you and try to follow what you say, it is only at a superficial level. You know, at the threat of caning them or punishment or sending them to their room or depriving them of a certain pleasure, they may toe the line and obey and listen. Obey and listen. It's only at a superficial level. The next one there you see, what the kids see in you as parents living your life is what makes lasting impact in the adult lives. Some kids, by the grace of God, will try to break out of the bad influence, but it is brutal struggle. You and I know this very well, and you know who I'm talking about. There are traits that we do not appreciate in our parents, that we've seen being done. And here we dislike them, but we repeat the very same trait in our lives. It's brutal struggle trying to break away from it. It's a lot easier setting a good example now so that the children are able to see and then perpetuate that rather than see bad behaviors and perpetuate the bad behaviors. And so what do? Act and behave as a good, loving parents. It's just not act in the sense of acting and just behaving for the moment. Make it as the base foundation of your character. That's what I mean by act and behave. As good, loving parents, you are setting up your children for a great success in the Lord. Sometimes we wonder how the church, some of our family members are in the church and some of our children are not in the church. But you know the answer. You and I know the answer. Two very successful men. This is an amazing story that I have to share with you here. I got it from my psychologist teacher one time, and she told this story to us. And she was a student of the great American psychologist Skinner. Actually, if you know some psychology there, is father of modern psychology, I think, and she was a student who worked on her PhD under him, and she narrated this story, and I have every reason to believe this is true, and it was astounding. So there was a research done. They wanted to find, two people, just two people who were most successful, very successful in every way possible. Okay. And then try to see what was the unifying character trait that they both share so that they can find a magical pill of success and then sell it. Okay. They said, hey, if you do this, you're going to be successful, guaranteed. So they searched for from coast to coast. Long story short, they found two people on the opposite of the coast in America. They're both very successful, and have a very good family and very well educated, good jobs and good, well paying job, and they're doing very well in every sense of the word. And so they were trying to analyze what is one thing that's common between them both. No matter how much they searched, tried to equate the two with one principle, they were not successful. They could not find a single trait that was common between them that made them successful. When they were about to give up, they started to ask them about their childhood. And when they talked about their childhood, they came to an understanding that both of them were at one point in time were going to a same school and attended the same classroom and had a same teacher 1 year. And so they tracked down that teacher, and she was by now very old, retired, and they went to her and started to interview her. And in the course of discussion, they told her, do you know this person and this person? And as soon as they mentioned the names of both those former students of hers, she, under her breath, said, boy, I love those kids. Boy, I love those kids. The lesson here is this. The one unifying factor in making them as successful as they were, at least in their research, was they shared a teacher who was so wonderfully loving to both of them. Goes on to say, love can move mountains. Love can change the unchangeable. The message here is love your kids. Love your kids in such a way that years from now, you will see them successful. If you think doing everything and anything will make them successful, think again. Many things can contribute and set some stepping stone, but that one ultimate stone that would make them launch their life, the career, their relationship into the stars is love. Is love. Do you know, in my personal experience, and I came across this, I don't have the reference for this now. It's been a while since I did this. And the Bible supports this at the same time, a spirit of prophecy too. That's why I was astounded by this. The Bible talks about, I think I have the verse here. It says, train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. Okay. And then we have child guidance, page 207 and 208 here, which talks about there are some children who need more patient, discipline, and kindly training than others. They have received as a legacy uncompromising traits of character, and because of this, they need the more of sympathy and love. By persevering labor, these wayward ones may be prepared for a place in the work of the master. They may possess undeveloped powers, which, when aroused, will enable them to fill places far in advance of those from whom more has been expected. And then page 208, it says, you can train more than you think. Your children, talking about the characters. Just as soon as the mother loves Jesus, she wants to train her children for him. You can train the disposition of children much more than you think you can from their earliest years. That precious name of Jesus should be a household word. Do you know something? A certain research points that children learn 80% 80% of what they ever going to be till they die, 80% in the first few years of their life. If I have to put a number, it's about 6 to 7 years, but I sit on number 6. About the first 6 years of their life, they learn 80% of everything they will base their life on. Even when they're CEO of a big financial company and they are a pastor, they are a medical doctor, they're a surgeon and whatnot, 80% of what guides them is learned during the first 6 years of their life. Only 20% of what they learn for the thereafter, their educational training and hands-on experience and everything else, their friends' influence, the teachers, you name it, that actually guides them 20%. It makes them a totality of 100% over there. My question is this. Oftentimes we say, oh, that school destroyed my child. That college really ruined it for them. Oh, that company really did not treat them. Do you know what? If 80% is what forms their character trait and everything for the rest of their lives, where were they the first 6 years of their lives? You get the answer. They were with us at home when bulk of the time was with us. That's how important it is that we nurture them. I know some of our kids are older than 6. As I just showed you, epigenetics wise and everything else, and with the power of God, they may not be 6. They could be 16. They could be 26. Some of us may have a character trait that we do not like, and we may be 66 years old. Things can still change by God's grace. But if you have a chance to nurture your kid and love them, love them. Love alone will make a huge, huge difference. Let me tell you one last thing. Please bear with me for another 2 minutes and I'll turn this time over to you guys here. The prodigal son. The prodigal son. Do you know why the prodigal son came back to the father? In my opinion, it was not because he ran out of money. It's not because he did not have food. It's not because he thought, okay, I can go and be a servant. No. One thing, he knew beyond the shadow of doubt. There's another beautiful sermon on this. And if I have a chance, I will love to preach the sermon one of these days. But the only thing that drove him back was because of father's love. He knew living with his father how much he loved. And because of that, he was able to reason everything else and turn around and go back with full confidence, knowing that he will be accepted. And sure enough, we know what happened. The father was not busy about everything else. He actually saw him from afar. Again, I'm tempted to go into that sermon, but it was father's love that actually brought him back. It is so important in this current dangerous world that you tell your children in no certain terms. My father and mother, to be honest, I don't know, it's a culture, you may laugh at it, or you may frown, or you may be thinking my mom and dad are very bad people. No, my mom and dad are best people in the world. I wouldn't exchange them for anything in the world. But yet, they never told me that they love me. That's the culture. Some of you could probably relate to it. But I grew up in a culture now here that for every drop of a hat, you said, I love you, sonny, I love you, daughter. But it's beside the point. We can talk about it another time. Never told us that they can love us. But it is so important that you actually tell your children, even when you're disciplined and when you're angry, when you're upset, and when you do whatever thing with them, tell them in no uncertain term. Tell them that they get it. And also behave in such a way that it shows that mom and dad, we love you. No matter what you do, we will love for you to live a good life, go in the straight and narrow, and love Jesus and everything. But even if you do not, this is where you need to kick in and be that difference. Even if you don't love Jesus, even if you do not go and walk in the straight and narrow, will not obey us and go wayward and go whatever, we still want you to know when you have gone to the end of your path and life, and you actually dead end, there's no hope. We want you to still know before you give up on your life that mom and dad love you, and you can always come back to us. That guarantee you have to always give them. You know what the saddest thing is? When son is wayward and goes right to the end of his life, and he turns around and he looks, there is nobody he can depend on. And that's when he's going to give up his hope and his life. But I hope every one of our children, when they go to the end of their life, whether they live good life or bad life, when they turn around and they look, there should be a mother and a father standing there with arms open saying, you can still come to me. You know why I say that? That's exactly what Jesus do for you and me. You and I are not perfect. We love to. But when we do all that we do and we turn around and we see Jesus, do you see Jesus still waiting for you there with open arms? Absolutely. He still stands there and he says, come home. I'll accept you. God bless you. Remember, behold, children are a heritage from the Lord.